In a friendship, a new friendship, or a new relationship at first, like everything feels a lot more easy. The closer you get, it's almost like jaws coming towards you. At the beginning, I felt more freed up to be all of me. And now that we're closer, I feel like I can't be all of me as much. Things about you used to not bother me that are really bothering me now. Why is that? Because at the beginning, our nervous system doesn't associate them with family. And the closer we get, the more our nervous system says, well, they must be like family because they're one of my most important people now. They're who I go to for connection, intimacy, love. Well, it must be just like the past. And this is where relationships get really exciting and juicy and beautiful and really hard. Because the work of relationships requires us to go towards that, which was never easy. And when we are able to bring resolution, the things that used to be really hard are filled with so much more ease, and our relationships as a whole can begin to flourish. Welcome to You Make Sense. This podcast is a manual to understanding your human experience so that you can navigate the world with freedom, ease, empowerment, and create the life that you desire. Remember, you make sense, all parts, always. Have you ever noticed in your relationships, whether it be a romantic partnership with your closest friends or maybe with your family, when things are going really well, there's a lot of ease involved in the relational experience. And maybe you notice that you feel like you can show up as your full self, you can communicate your truth because everything is sort of flowing. You're getting your needs met, you're meeting their needs, and there's an overall ease to the experience. But when we find ourselves in a relationship and things aren't working, like the puzzle pieces aren't fitting together exactly right, all of the sudden, all of that ease goes out the window, and the relationship itself either can feel like it's on the line, or it can feel like I can't be all of me anymore. And we're left with this experience of relationships feeling wildly challenging. And we don't really know how to navigate them. So if that's you, I'm sort of laughing because this is all of us. This is a part of the human experience. If this is something that you found yourself experiencing, keep listening to this episode because we're going to talk about why this happens and how we can begin bringing resolution to it so that our relationships, all of them, can be filled with a lot more ease, not just when things are working, but when things are challenging too. So a lot of this episode, I'm going to gear towards romantic relationships, but I'm going to be giving you lots of examples of how this applies to all relationships as a whole, specifically the closest relationships in your life. Now, at the beginning of a relationship, whether it be a romantic one or maybe with a new friend who you're like, I don't know, this might be my best friend. This might become a closest relationship in my life. At the beginning, there is usually a lot more ease involved in the experience. Why is that? Because early on in a relationship, my nervous system is still perceiving that other person as new and in many ways as a stranger. Now, for many of us, our deepest relational woundings happened with our family of origin. That means those that we grew up with, those that raised us. And for many of us, we may have had you may have had really loving caregivers who supported you or were there for you. Others of you listening may have had caregivers like mine who weren't safe and weren't available. But regardless, none of them got it exactly right. And so the deepest woundings that we experience are with those caregivers because they are the people that we wanted to love us the most. They are the people that we were most exposed to and vulnerable with and open to, and biologically and inherently wanted them to choose us, to love us, to see us, to adore us more than anyone else on the planet. And so if our caregivers were unable to do that for a variety of reasons, and no one was able to do it exactly right, we get these deep, deep woundings. Think of it like a cut or, an open wound from those experiences in our lives. And so as we go through life and maybe we begin on our healing journey, because we're dealing with a lot of ramifications of those challenging things we experienced in our lives, what we do is we start to heal up those wounds, which is what the healing journey is all about. And now this gaping wound that's been around for 30 years or 50 years is no longer gaping. It's really healing. First, we sew it up. And then after sewing it up, it starts to heal. And now we have this beautiful scar. I call them beautiful scars because it's something to be proud of to do that healing work. But here's the thing. There's this last bit of the wound that remains unresolved. So it might not be quite as tender, but it doesn't have scar tissue on it yet. It's still exposed and open. Why is that? Because those types of woundings, the deepest ones, the last bit of resolution that needs to happen there needs to have an experience that mimics what caused the wound. And so if that wound happened in and with our family of origin, with our caregivers who are supposed to love us the most, the people that were the center of our world, our person, our home, our family, our place of love, contentment, joy, connection, all those things, then we have to have a relational dynamic in our lives that replicates that enough that it provides the conditions necessary for the healing to occur. So here's the deal with like my dog Truman. He helped me heal a lot of the wounding. But that last 10% that I'm talking about, or whatever percent it is, I needed a romantic relationship or a very close relationship to do that final healing. And I will say a therapeutic relationship helps with so much of the healing. A closest friendship helps with so much of the healing. Community helps with so much of the healing. But none of those relationships will mimic your childhood experience as much as a romantic relationship. So I'm sharing this with you because if you find romantic relationships to be the hardest thing on the planet, harder than friendships, harder than relationships with coworkers and community, this is why. It's not because romantic relationships aren't for you. It's because this is where the poking at our deepest woundings occur the most. So because of this, in many ways, one of the biggest purposes of romantic relationship is so that it can provide the conditions necessary for us to come into our wholeness. So there's a quote that a really incredible couples therapist named Terry Real says often, that we marry our unfinished business, or we get into close proximity or romantic relationship to our unfinished business. How and why does that work? Well, it comes back to our nervous systems. So we all have this beautiful threat detector in our brainstem called neuroception. It looks out into the world every millisecond to decide if we're safe or not. This threat detector, my friend, is also your picker when it comes to people. It's your picker when it comes to friendships, but it's also your picker in terms of romantic relationships. So we all have this internal database with every lived experience inside of it, including what love is. And so whatever love was that you experienced in the past is what your barometer for love will be now. The goal is that we do enough healing work that we change our baseline for what love is. So no longer is love the same thing that we got as a child. Love is what we've given ourselves. And there will still be a flavoring of some of those things from the past. So I want to give an example of what this actually looks like. Let's say you decide you're going to venture into dating. You're really excited about this. So you just so happen to go on a date with somebody who doesn't live in the city that you live in. That person is a bit of a workaholic. They don't really know how to slow down. They prioritize their success in their lives, which is all has to do with their own unresolved stuff, of course. And that's how they're really oriented towards the world. But they really, really like you a lot. And they are kind and they are present when they are with you or when they're talking to you. But as you can see here, there's some things that inhibit them from either putting you first because their work comes first, or it inhibits them from even being in your presence because they don't live where you live. Now, what's going to be in that person's database? Well, inside of that database, there may be experiences where I was neglected, I was abandoned, I wasn't chosen. And so as you can see, this person that I'm dating is very different than my childhood experience, but there are flavorings of the past. Now, I'm going to take it a step further when it comes to having tough conversations. Let's say that same partner that I found, when there is conflict in the relationship, something isn't working, and maybe I feel hurt, when I come to them and say, hey, this isn't working for me, or hey, I'm feeling really hurt by what happened there, that in that moment, that triggers for them the little part of them that was made to feel like they were bad or that they weren't going to be loved because they made a mistake. So do you know what they do? They shut down. And so the moment that I come to them when there's conflict, they deflect, they shut down, they won't take responsibility. And guess what's in my database? I had maybe caregivers who gaslit me. So I said, hey, this isn't okay. Let's go to a more extreme example. This isn't okay that you are screaming at me or abusing me. And then I'm told it's my fault or it wasn't that big of a deal. So as you can see here, what happened in my past is wildly different than what's happening with my partner, but it has enough connected tissue or it has enough flavoring of similarity that reminds my system of what I experienced in the past. And when Terry says we marry our unfinished business, this is what he's talking about. Every single person, by the way, to some degree has done this. I don't want you to think you're an anomaly or something's wrong, that you chose a partner that pokes at that last 10%. That is how we're designed in many ways. Why? Because your system needs the container of a romantic relationship in order to gain the resolution that it never got. The resolution that it can't get one-on-one with you and your clinician or practitioner. It can't get with your best friend. We can get that 90%, as I said, but there's still that bit left. And do you know that you are poking at your partner's last 10%? So maybe in your relational dynamic, there is a part of you that shows up in the relationship and is still in some ways looking for your partner to be your everything and to rescue that younger part of you. And that creates a little bit of codependency, meaning I'm really only feel comfortable or feel safe when my partner is very available for me. And that means that the expectation, that's not verbally said, is that everything else in their life will come second to me. And that might be triggering for them that last 10% where they were parentified and they had to take care of their caregiver. And so you can see I'm very different than their caregiver, but there's enough flavoring that it's reminding their system of that. And here's the beautiful thing, everybody. When we marry our unfinished business or we get into close proximity or relationship to our unfinished business, this is an opportunity for both of us to turn towards the last bit of our healing that we need to resolve. And in my resolving, let's say that codependent dynamic that I named, if I am able to turn towards my parts and say, hey, it's actually safe to allow my partner to put other things at some points in time ahead. Like maybe there's things going on in their family of origin they need to be addressing, and that's taking precedence, or something in work or with a friend, that doesn't mean you're not loved. And I can do the deeper work I need to do with my parts, and also ask my partner to show up in ways that I need that are not that are no longer leaning into that codependent dynamic. And for them, it allows them to work with a part of themselves that feels shamed for like they're bad. And then to be able to come out of shutting down and come towards connection. When both parties can do that, the last bit of that 10% is able to be healed. And by the way, we do not do this by trying to change our partner. Can't change anybody. We do this by first looking inward. What is this poking at for me that I can now address? And then what can I ask for in my partner that will be an invitation to them further into their healing? And I know that was a big explanation, but I think it's very important to understand in romantic relationship. If you're like, as you're listening to this, thinking like, whoa, I totally married or am partnered with a version of my caregivers or a healthier version of my caregivers. Like I can see that. Yes, that's exactly how it's supposed to be. And so that isn't a negative, it's an invitation and a positive. And I also just want to name that when it comes to ruptures or disconnections in our relationships, The hardest type of disconnection is going to be in a romantic relationship. Why? Because it reminds our parts of our childhood the most. Although it goes without saying that this will trickle out into many different relationships, because if ruptures or disconnections were not historically safe for us, then our nervous system is going to orient towards them as dangerous. One last thing that I want to say on this topic is that if you've ever noticed, to just go back to what I was saying earlier, that in a friendship, a new friendship, or a new relationship, at first, like everything feels a lot more easy. And the closer you get, it's almost like it's like jaws coming towards you. What begins to happen is it feels not so easy anymore. I might even notice that I feel like at the beginning, I felt more freed up to be all of me. And now that we're closer, I feel like I can't be all of me as much. Or things about you used to not bother me that are really bothering me now. Why is that? Because at the beginning, our nervous system doesn't associate them with family. And the closer we get, the more our nervous system says, well, they must be like family because they're one of my most important people now. They're who I go to for connection, intimacy, love. Well, it must be just like the past. And now we superimpose the past onto the present. And this is where relationships get really exciting and juicy and beautiful and really hard. And just know that's true for all of us. So if you're somebody that tends to jump from relationship to relationship, or you tend to jump from friendship to friendship when things get hard, thinking, if I just find a friend who gets me more, if I just find a relationship that is more aligned, you're going to be on that adventure forever. Because the work of relationships requires us to go towards that, which was never easy. And when we are able to bring resolution, the things that used to be really hard are filled with so much more ease, and our relationships as a whole can begin to flourish. Enjoying what you've heard so far and want to go deeper into somatic healing? I have a free workbook called How to Gain Control Over How You Feel, and it will help you to get in the driver's seat of your experience and step towards your desires with more ease. Check the show notes below for a link to download. Another thing that I want to just name is that no one taught our parents or our grandparents how to be in relationship. Nobody taught anybody how to do it. So what happens in relationship is that they are filled to the brim with ruptures or difference and disconnection. That is a primary part of romantic relationships and relationships as a whole. If you are being authentically you. So if you are being authentically you in a relationship and your partner is being authentically them, that means we are going to butt against difference. We are not going to orient towards everything the same. We are going to have disagreements. We're going to have things that seem like they don't align. We are going to have things that hurt us that they do, and there's going to be things we do that hurt them, and not only hurt adult us, but trigger young parts of us. This is all the name of the game when it comes to relationship. And the only way to have depth of a relationship is that we are fully authentically us. When I hear people say, I never had a fight in a relationship ever. We've never had an argument. There was actually a very famous celebrity couple that had been together a long time that not long ago said, I just don't like naming people's names because why would I do that? Anyway, the point of what I'm trying to say is they recently said in an interview celebrating it, we've never had a fight, never even had a disconnection. What I would say, and anyone who does couples work would say, that means there is a lacking of showing up as our full authentic self in the relationship. Because if we actually did, we would be butting up, as I said, or hitting up against our difference. Now, this isn't to say that we want or should expect romantic relationships to be filled chronically over and over again, 20 times a day with a fight after a fight after a fight. But what I mean is we may notice that something that my partner does just pokes at something that's hard for me. Oh, I don't love that. Or that doesn't really work for me. This is normal. This isn't strange. And what we can tend to do if tough conversations or ruptures and disconnections were not safe for us in childhood, and maybe they meant love was withheld, then what we do is we morph into what we think we need to be in order for us to keep the connection, which means we're not showing up as our authentic self. And what is the thing we all want in a relationship? is that we are deeply seen and deeply known and deeply loved and cherished as we are. That is what we all want. And of course, other things too. Why do we want that? Because that's often the thing that we never fully got in our childhood experience. And because there is no perfect parent, as I named. And so what we are desiring is for that, but that means that we have to be fully seen and fully known, which means we have to get comfortable and oriented towards having tough conversations and how we can come back into repair when ruptures arise. So the way that we're all currently navigating tough conversations is usually one of two ways. Number one, how we had to in the past, rooted in our childhood, meaning how did I have to show up? Or number two, what we observed our caregivers doing with each other, meaning how did they have tough conversations? So if you grew up in a home where there was never any disconnection at all, meaning you might say to yourself, I never saw my parents fight. They never even disagreed. That's not possible. They just inhibited it. And that then leads to what we will do in our adult relationships too. So again, we're mimicking what we saw our caregivers do, or we are doing what we had to do in the past to remain safe. So we all have these brilliant protective parts that show up to help us navigate these ruptures, fights, or disconnections in a way that feels safe. So again, if ruptures or disconnections were not a cue of safety in the past, we will adapt, we will develop protective parts, and we will navigate them in a way that our nervous systems think are safe for us. So before I get into that, I just want to show you an example of what it would look like to have experienced healthy rupture and repair or tough conversations in our childhood. So something that's really important to know is that it's the adult's job to navigate that experience and to repair the rupture. So let's say when you were a little kid, you're 13 years old and you're in this differentiating experience with your parents. And that usually means that I'm starting to think my parents are not that cool. They annoy me. I'm bothered by them. I'm starting to push them away. And maybe I do something like, I call them a name or I say something that's not super kind to my parent. Now, let's say my parent, because they don't have a lot of capacity in their own nervous system at that moment, and they're feeling really stressed out, so they respond with a dysregulation in their own nervous system, and they say something unkind back to us, like, you know what, you're such a little brat and you're not grateful for anything. I don't know. I'm just making that up on the spot. So in that moment, the job of the parent is to notice, ooh, I'm dysregulated and I am coming at my child from a place of self-protection. So their job in that moment is to say, I need to go regulate. And when they come back into regulation, their job is to repair it with you, to not give you the silent treatment, to not withhold love, to not shut down, to not victimize themselves, and instead say, hey, I noticed in that moment, I became really triggered and I never should have said that to you. And I want you to know I don't mean that. And I'm so sorry that I did. And I want to know how it made you feel, because however it made you feel is exactly right. And I completely honor your truth. And my goal is to really show you how loved you are by me and to repair this with you. But I just want to make space for anything that you feel. And then we say, yeah, it made me feel unsafe. And their job is to validate that. Oh, I'm so sorry it made you feel unsafe. I understand why it would. And that's the validating process and mirroring back our experience. And them saying, you know what, honey, next time, if I notice that you're saying something to me that feels kind of hurtful like that, like, wow, you look so ugly today. I'm just thinking about what a teen might do to their parent. Like, you look so old and ugly and tired, that a parent might say, you know what, next time, I might just say to you, hey, that didn't feel great. And maybe we can come into a repair from that place. So my point is, I'm just modeling what it would look like. The parent doesn't withhold love. They don't harm you or hurt you in any particular way. And this should begin happening when a kid is really young. If that didn't happen, we develop these protector parts to help us navigate those experiences. So I just want to go through some of the protective parts that we can develop that help us to navigate tough conversations and ruptures. One of them is blaming. Instead of taking ownership, I make it your fault. Why do I do that? I either saw a caregiver do that, or at a moment in time in my life, I was blamed so much. I felt so inherently bad that I can't possibly tolerate that. So I have to make this your fault so I don't have to feel it. Another is we can deflect or make excuses and say, yeah, I did that, but here's why. Because I'm so overworked or I'm so tired or whatever. Why? Again, we either saw it modeled or that's what we had to do in the past. Some of us shut down when tough conversations happen and we avoid things altogether. Like, I don't even talk about it. You sweep it under the rug. That is a very common thing that so many of us do. Others of us get angry to scare our partner. Now, not necessarily to harm our partner, but it's a really smart thing we can tend to do if we know that it will put our partner in the role of then caretaking us, or they feel afraid so they're no longer upset with us. So a lot of us can tend to do that. Threatening to leave. So I'm just going to go, which can stop the focus being on that tough conversation and can shift it to our partner saying essentially, no, don't go, which shows my system, oh, I am actually loved. Others of us can go into fixing. How do I fix this scenario? Which means I undermine my own experience. And that falls into the same category of fawning or caretaking in tough conversations. So I don't actually fully name what isn't working for me, or maybe after I do it and then my partner shuts down, I disregard that need I have and then I go into caretaking them. All of these are brilliant adaptive things that we do in order to navigate hard conversations or ruptures. I remember with one of my best friends in the world, there was a time where we had a pretty big rupture that had been going on for like 6 months or so, and I never said anything. Okay, so that's the avoidance, right? I don't have tough conversations. Why was the reason that I didn't have tough conversations? Because I was left, abandoned as a kid, and love was very conditional. So my system was saying, if you communicate this to her, she's for sure never going to talk to you again. This was someone who had been friends with me for, 8 years at the time. And I'll never forget the day that I was like, I'm going to go do this thing, this hard thing. I'd done enough work that I was like, I'm going to have the tough conversation and I know what I'm going to say. I am telling you, there was a young part of me that was certain that even though we were so close, that was going to be the last time I ever saw her. And I said to myself, well, I'm still going to do the healthy thing and I'm going to communicate it. But of course, that younger part was saying that because that's all I knew about ruptures. And by the way, I'll share this, that we have a really beautiful friendship and there's so much healing and health that has happened through it. It's like that Terry Real quote of, you marry your unfinished business. Your closest friendships can also help support that as well. And I remember her saying to me, yeah, I'm noticing myself shutting down right now. Or I'm noticing myself wanting to deflect this. See how healthy and beautiful that is? It was still happening, but there was an acknowledgement of what was occurring. And through the conversation and a follow-up conversation, it actually led to deeper intimacy than ever before in our friendship, a level of closeness that wasn't there previously. And so when we can do this brave thing and go towards this experience of tough conversations and make it different, it brings the most beautiful healing to the past and a deepening of a relationship. And our system begins to see that I can be all of me and still be loved. We can have a disagreement or be hurt or even be mad, and love doesn't go away. And that was our inherent biological right that so many of us were robbed of. Even something as simple as if you're my generation or older, there's often like messages like you do something wrong, you wrote on the wall, because you're learning that you didn't know yet that writing on the wall wasn't okay, or maybe you sort of knew, but you really wanted to. That what happens? Caregiver comes in, they yell at you, and then they say, go to your room. What is the messaging there? When I make a mistake, love is withheld. My loving parent goes away, and I am also told to leave or go away. And then I am left alone in my room in the experience of overwhelm. And so, do you know what I'm going to learn to do as an adult? Don't make mistakes in a relationship, because if you do, don't write on the theoretical wall. Don't make a mistake. Be above and beyond the type of friend that you think you should be. I used to do this and buy extravagant gifts for my friends all the time. I would show up and do all these incredible things for them all the time. But that wasn't coming from my authentic self. That was coming from, not that I didn't want to do things for them, but it was coming from a place of, please don't stop loving me. And the more that we can come into our authentic self, the more we can have this experience, or disconfirming experiences rather, where we show our nervous system tough conversations and ruptures can be a wildly different experience. So what I want you to think about for a moment is, in your childhood, what did rupture or disconnection represent to you? Did it represent love being withheld? Or maybe you being made to feel like you're bad? Maybe it represented shame, which is, of course, linked to what I just said about being bad. Did it represent a lack of safety? Or maybe did it represent abandonment or a disconnection? So as you can see from all of those examples, for many of us, ruptures were very unsafe things. So as the result, what do? We try to avoid them altogether because we don't want to risk losing relational connection. The result of this is it will always lead to resentment in our relationships. Why? Because we're having a need arise that we aren't allowing to be expressed. And if that continues to happen over and over and over and over and over again, the messaging that we tell ourselves is, my partner doesn't care, or my friend doesn't care, and we become more and more frustrated or more and more angry. But here's the truth. We have to turn that finger towards ourselves and say, is it that my partner doesn't care, or is it that my nervous system is projecting my past onto my partner, and therefore I am not even giving them the opportunity to actually show me that things can be different? And this is what all of us are doing to some degree. Now, what I want to say is, this is really different than having a protective part of ourself who is hyper-focused on what our partner is doing wrong. I had a part that it was certainly wildly focused on that. What aren't you doing right? You could do that right. You're not doing this right. Why? Because that part was protecting the vulnerable part of me that didn't want to feel that 10% anymore of that pain. My work was to say, that's so interesting. I'm doing that. I'm noticing that. What does the vulnerable part actually need from me? The more that I was able to give that vulnerable part what she really needed, the less the protector was doing that. So I just want to name that's really different than us avoiding the things that aren't working or avoiding the things that we actually need. Your needs are not too much. Your partner's needs aren't too much. And the more that we can turn towards the tough conversations and have repair, the more our relationships really begin to take off and thrive. So before we do that, I just want to get into talking about how many of us attempt to repair before we begin embodying this work. So for many of us, what we feel is that the risk of exposure and vulnerability that is required in repair feels too risky and it feels like too much. Why? Because in the past, when I was in experiences of rupture, if I was to open that way, I wouldn't have been safe. And perhaps if I tried to, I was met with something that was really painful, meaning a lack of safety as I was trying to repair. So instead, what we can tend to do when we're trying to repair is present in a disconnected way. So for some of us, that means that we will complain. So instead of communicating what I am actually feeling, I communicate a complaint about my partner. Instead of saying, oh, I'm noticing that I deeply want you to be more curious about me. I am wanting so much for you to just want to ask me questions about what's happening in my life because you matter so much to me. And when you don't, I notice that I feel like this deep pain inside. And it feels really overwhelming and it feels really painful. And by the way, here's a caveat to this. I also want to get clear on how much of what I'm feeling is about the present moment and how much of it is poking at something in the past. A lot of times we project onto our partner every last thing that's unresolved from the past. So in that moment, let's say I was neglected in my childhood, My partner, I really want them to be curious about me, and they haven't asked a question maybe about my day or whatever, it will poke at my childhood neglect. And so in that moment, I'm not just feeling as my adult woman self the disappointment, I am feeling a lifetime of neglect and how deep that wound is. And it is my responsibility to decipher the two. What's about the past? What's about the present? I have to tend to the part in the past. And it's my partner's job to then meet my present day need and also to support me with that younger part, although they cannot be the primary parent to that part. Our work is that we can help each other in really profound ways. So again, complaint is one way that we try to make repair. What we're doing here is we're guarding ourselves, guarding our heart. We're not being vulnerable as an attempt to try to get a need met. And of course, we know that that doesn't work. Another thing that we can tend to do is shut down. So we want to make the repair and we think about making the repair and then we just avoid it altogether, or we shut down when our partner wants to come close to us. So we're not even allowing for the experience to occur. Another way that we do this is that some of us might be good at verbal communication. This was definitely the way that I did this. But all of a sudden, when I'm presenting it, it's literally like I'm presenting something at work, or I'm talking in a very clinical way that lacks vulnerability or lacks connection. We may even talk and take on this role as a therapist. So it's almost like I'm looking down at my partner from this high horse in a way where I am keeping myself safe by not actually opening. That's what all of those things are doing. And of course, when someone is on the other side of that, do you know what their system is going to do? It's going to self-protect or defend in their own way. So here's the thing. In order to actually have a tough conversation in a way that brings both people closer together, we have to open. And this is why relationships can be so incredibly hard, because that takes exquisite bravery. It takes us opening the parts of our heart that we have closed off because historically speaking, it wasn't safe to let someone else see us in this way. It wasn't safe to ask for more from them. It wasn't safe to soften. And so at first, it can feel very scary. It can feel counterintuitive. As I told you, in my friendships or romantic relationships, I was like certain it meant the relationship was going to end. It's totally going to end. There's no way this is going to work out. Or when I stopped fawning and I decided I'm going to actually just show up and communicate my need, and let's say the other person at first got defensive or shut down, to me that meant they're gone forever. They don't love me anymore. And so the work is that we lean into it and we get to see that our imperfect partner and imperfect us are different from the past. And it is this softening and opening together that creates beautiful resolution from the past and deepens the relationship as a whole. So I just want to go quickly over some steps and rules that we want to think about when having tough conversations. The first and most important thing to know is that you cannot repair when you're in dysregulation. If you are dysregulated, your nervous system is actively protecting you. And it's like you have a sword out and your partner or your friend has a sword out. If we both have swords out, we cannot resolve this. So we have to pause when dysregulated and come into regulation. After you're in regulation, what I want you to do is get curious about how much of this is about my adult self and what I actually feel, and how much of this is about stuff in the past. Like I gave you the example for me about neglect. And my job and responsibility is to reparent that part that is being triggered. If it's 60% about the past, 40% about today, I got to address the 60%. And then I got to get really clear on what does adult me want and need in my relationship. Feel that in your body. We want to be unapologetic about what adult me needs, especially if our needs weren't historically met. So it might be like, I really need you to ask me about my day or what's going on in my life. And not only will it help me, but it'll help my parts. Next, we want to just find a time to reconnect when we're both regulated. By the way, that you both agree upon, meaning it's not just like, I'm regulated now and I walk into my partner's office and say, it's time for us to talk. They might not be ready to do that. So we have to wait until both are ready. The other thing I really want to name is, it is very important for both people to focus on the partnership, not on our individual self as the priority. Now, of course, my work is to do the work on my younger parts and with them, but in the relational container, what we really want to come together on is being a team in this partnership. And if I can be relationally focused, if we both can say, we want this relationship to be great, this friendship or this working relationship, by the way, nobody wants any relationship not to be good, right? So if you're in a working environment and you're both feeling like this isn't working, if you approach it first by saying like, I want this to feel great for both of us. I really care about this partnership. Again, whatever type of partnership it is, it totally changes the lens about how we approach it. And now we're teammates. Next, it's very important to begin with some positives. Like, what do I love about you? Or what do I admire about you? How grateful am I for you? What that sends the message is that I am not shaming you. I am not a source of danger. I see so much goodness. And do you know what I actually want? And here's what I want us all to remember. If we're in disconnection with someone we care about, what do we really want? We want to feel loved by them and we want to love them. We want to feel seen by them and we want to be seen. We want more of them and they want more of us. These are all beautiful things that we actually want. So if we can start from a positive when we're communicating, that's very important. And then we have to open the parts of us that we have closed off. This is where the bravery comes in. And it will feel counterintuitive, like when I told you when I was driving to that dinner with my friend and was certain we would never talk again. Because the parts are going to say, this wasn't safe in the past, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And we have to take their hand and say, my love, I know that this is reminding you of the past and let me show you how it can be different and is different. And the expectation shouldn't be that your partner, your friend gets it exactly right. The expectation is that each of us can lean into being relationally focused. Each of us can lean into imperfectly taking responsibility. Each of us can lean into opening imperfectly. And the more that we do that again and again, the greater ease there is around repair. Ruptures are a natural, normal part of relationships. And the outcome of a relationship has nothing to do with the amount of ruptures that you experience or arguments or fights. It's how well and how quickly you repair. And if you learn to do this, relationships are filled with so much more ease. And that last 10% of that wound gets to be healed. Not sure where to start with somatic healing? My free quiz, What's Keeping You Stuck, will equip you with a personalized guide and tangible trauma-informed tools to help you regulate your nervous system. Check out the link in the show notes to get started. So now we're going to get to the Q&A portion of this episode. If you haven't submitted a question for the podcast and you have one for me, we would love to receive it. So we're going to link in the show notes a link on how to do that. You can submit a video question, an audio question, or a written one too. And we try to get to as many as we possibly can. I want to say if you have submitted one, just know that we will likely get to it down the road. So keep listening. Let's get to the 3 that we have for today.
Hey, Sarah. Hey, Rachel. My name is James, and I just wanted to say thank you for the podcast and that it was an interview Sarah did with Mark Groves in December of 2023, which really started me on my healing journey, which has now taken me through into talk, into EMDR, and with the help of a great EMDR therapist and couples therapist here in Atlanta. Really great. My question is around, I've done a lot of work and feel a lot better, tremendous progress, but I still sort of feel guilty. I was the one who hurt everybody in relationships. I was the one who abandoned friends. And now that I've kind of gone through this and have a better understanding of who I am and why I was doing those things, how do I forgive myself for the hurt I put on other people, how I abandoned others, and kind of explain where I was and where I am today? Thanks for everything.
This is such an important question. And what's really necessary to resolve this and to forgive ourselves is we must understand the parts of us that did that pushing away or did create relational dynamics that were really hard. The more that we can get to know who those parts of us are and build a relationship with them, the more that we can really access internal forgiveness. What I recommend for this person and anyone who relates to this, please go listen to the episodes that I have on parts work. What you are identifying, the part that maybe sabotaged relationships or got angry or was unkind or pushed people away, that is a protector. The job of that protector is to ensure your vulnerable part, the precious, precious, usually younger ones, never have to experience the pain of the past again. So I'm going to make something up here. I don't know if this is your story, but if a relationship was really unsafe in the past and maybe love was really conditional or you were abandoned, then that vulnerable part who wasn't chosen, who was abandoned, they are still experiencing the pain of that past in our present lives. So what occurs is we develop these internal protectors soon after the vulnerable parts experience whatever they experienced. And the job of the protector is to obviously protect and ensure the vulnerable part never feels or experiences that again. So if our protector has to choose between us having fulfilling friendships or us having beautiful relationships where we are deeply loved or our safety, we will always choose our safety. Because you see, deep bonding, like letting people close to us, that is risky business. And to the protectors, they're saying it's so risky, I don't want the younger part to attach in the same way because I am so terrified that they will be abandoned again. So we deflect love, we push it away, we pick fights, we sabotage, we do all of this stuff. Or the protector does. So the more that you can identify who is that protector, what was their job or is their job, and who are they protecting? Not just identifying them, by the way, but then we have to build a relationship with them, get to know them. How old are they? This is all internal family systems or parts work. That protector is not trying to ruin your life. And, oftentimes whenever I've met any of my protectors, I had a protector that did this, by the way, pushed away anyone that loved me in so many different ways. When I actually met her, she's fierce, by the way, like, oof, tough, because she had to be. It's the only way I was going to survive. So I used to call her like an ice queen, very intense in her ability to never, ever let anyone that close push people away. And when I actually got to know her, instead of being afraid of her or shaming her, what I saw is, yes, she has this tough exterior, but underneath, she is so lonely. She is so sad. She never got to have a childhood. She's been doing so much work to protect. The protectors don't want to do all of that hard work. And when you can actually love them and reorient to them in a whole new way, like if a 15-year-old learned to do that or a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old, whatever, there was a good reason why. And if I can actually orient towards wanting to help them instead of wanting to stop, that is very important. If you are just trying to make your protector stop, could you imagine if someone tried to do that to you? Would it make you want to? No, because you'd feel used. Like you only want me to stop doing this for your own benefit. You don't care about me. So we actually have to fall in love with those protectors. And when we do, what happens is you take their hand and say, oh, my love, thank you so much for protecting that vulnerable part. Thank you for protecting them in a way that no one did. Thank you for learning how to cut people out of your life because that saved the vulnerable part forever having to feel abandonment again. Thank you. And guess what? I'm here now. And that means you don't have to do this protecting anymore because I'm here. And you know what the protectors say to us? They're like, okay, I don't believe you because I don't trust you because I don't know you that well yet. So we have to earn their trust. And the more that we show those protective parts, you can count on me. I'm not going anywhere. And the more that you can love them, you most certainly can forgive them because they've never been trying to cause you or anyone harm or pain. They've just been trying to keep the vulnerable part safe. So that is the work. And when we do that, internal forgiveness actually arrives. So let's get to the next question that we have today.
Hi there, Sarah. Thank you so much for absolutely everything you do. It's been such a blessing to me and my friends and family. I've been listening to this episode about real versus perceived danger. And a lot of the friends that I have are actually in, a situation where they are in real danger and unsafety, usually emotionally unsafe in their home, if they're living with their parents still. I'm in my 20s, and so a lot of us do still live at home as we're figuring out what we want to do with our lives. So I just wondered if you could say anything about how to even regulate when you are still in an unsafe environment, just for my friends. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for the question that you asked. And there are many people that are in challenging environments, whether it's it be living with your family of origin still, or maybe being in a job that's kind of toxic and it's not the most safe environment, or being in school that doesn't feel entirely safe, and so on and so forth. So I just want to name that lots of people have that experience. Or by the way, just being in the world, walking down the street because of the color of my skin or because of my sexual orientation and so on and so forth. I lack safety in some ways. So my job is not to deny the reality of that, but to really first and foremost get clear on how much of this is actually not safe and how much of this is the past being superimposed on the present. They're very different things, including, by the way, with the family of origin. Because adult me, 20-year-old me, 25-year-old me, has a lot more agency and power than 10-year-old me. So if you can get clear on how much of this is about the past and how much is it about the present, that's very important. Listen to the episodes on parts work to help address the past stuff. When we're able to anchor in what's actually true in the present moment. And if I don't know, I'm going to make something up here, but maybe you're living with your family of origin and there is yelling all the time, fighting all of the time. Everybody is really dysregulated. That isn't an experience or an environment that I'm totally safe inside of. So what we have to do is to find for ourselves safety, both in the environment and outside of the environment. It's really important. So that might be finding safety with a clinician practitioner or therapist and letting that container be my refuge where I can be all of me. Finding safety with friends where I can show up as all of me. Finding safety in community or in engaging in things that bring me joy where I can be all of me. As you heard me say in all of those examples, where I can be all of me. And where I can be deeply held. And by the way, where I can process what is happening or coming up for me in that unsafe environment. That's really important. And then our work really truly is, what steps need to happen for me? If I'm actually in an unsafe environment, what steps does adult me need to begin taking? Not overnight, it might be a year-long plan, but to come out of that unsafe environment. It's our adult selves' job to not only protect ourselves, but our younger parts. And so if it's like, well, I can't really afford it. Okay, so what plan can I put in place that over time will allow for me to? How can I begin doing that? Same with being in a work environment. The trouble that a lot of us get into is we're so familiarized with being in unsafe situations, we never leave. And so, a hard truth is you can't have overall regulation in your nervous system if I continue to remain in environments that are lacking a lot of safety for myself. I say this a lot. What am I watering my plant with? You're the plant. And I need to be nourishing me. So we do it with all those outside sources as I named. And then we have to really think about what game plan can I put into place to come out of this unsafe environment, or to see if it's possible to shift what's happening in that environment. But that takes everybody involved to have a willingness to change or shift. And the other thing is somatic boundaries, really important. We'll link this out in the show notes too, but I have a program called You Make Sense. You can get on the wait list for it. I offer it twice a year. And we talk in that program, not just talk, but I give you tools to experience embodied boundaries. How can I maintain regulation when other people are dysregulated around me? It's really important work. All of those things will help you to be able to navigate that experience with greater regulation, and then also help you transition out of it too. So let's get to the last question that we have today.
Hi, Sarah. My name is Scott Doniger. I'm a chronic stress counselor living just north of Boulder, Colorado. And my question for submission actually brings together two of the topics that you have listed. I'm really curious to learn what your perspective is on Stephen Porges's fantastic polyvagal theory and how it integrates with parts work and how you might use it in a clinical setting or with clients that you work with. And I think that would be super helpful, not just for me. I have found polyvagal theory to be very helpful for certain types of clients, particularly those who take a more intellectual approach or a very scientific approach, and they want to know exactly what's happening inside of their nervous system when they get hijacked by a part or when they're trying to access self-energy, for example. So I found Deb Dana's perspectives working with Stephen Porges to be very helpful. But I'd really like to learn what you think. And that's my question. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
I love this question so much. And one of the pillars of the work that I do is bringing together both polyvagal theory and parts work, or IFS, and the intersection of both. What I have found is that in order to successfully do parts work, you have to have an orientation towards nervous system work, or polyvagal theory, and here's why. Many people try to approach parts work or inner child work without having the ability to access what this clinician is calling self-energy, which is the term in IFS. But think about it like your regulated most adult self. If you can't access that version of you, then when you go to try to get to know a younger part of you that's really in a lot of distress, you won't be able to hold the anchor of regulation that they need. Like, for example, imagine a terrified child came towards me and they were just so scared. Oh my gosh, I'm going to die. And all of a sudden I got really scared and I was like, oh my gosh, are you going to die? Maybe you're going to die. Maybe we're both going to die. Or maybe I didn't say those words. I said, everything's fine. Don't you see it on my face? Everything's fine. Everything's going to be totally okay. I do not feel okay. That child will not have the safety they need in order to regulate their nervous system. So they won't feel better. This is why a lot of people find parts work not to work. It's not because it is not profoundly and wildly impactful. It's because you can't actually do it unless you can access your ventral vagal complex or your state of regulation in your nervous system. So when I'm working with people, one of the first things that I do before parts work, and this is what I do inside of the programs that I offer, is we have to first address your nervous system. So we have to be able to anchor in adult us. So I spend a lot of time when I'm working in programs with people getting what I call anchors to regulation, or a tether or a rope to regulation. We create neural pathways for that, easy access points that I can get adult me online. So moments of regulation. Then we focus on overall regulation of the nervous system. So I'm, number one, building my capacity to be with dysregulation, which is what I have to do to be with parts. And also, I'm building my capacity, as I said, to access adult me. When I think of parts work, what we're actually doing is we are becoming the warrior. We are becoming the superhero our parts needed and never had. So we do all this training, as like I don't know, I'm saying as a superhero would. Do superheroes train? I don't know. Let's just imagine they do. We're doing all this training, right? As a warrior, I'm training for this experience. What is the experience of going back to the part and giving them every last thing they never got then in the here and now with us? And that requires you to be brave. It requires you to build capacity in your nervous system so you are not afraid of what they were afraid of. And it requires you to be able to be present to their experience, not trying to change it, which ushers them into regulation. So we have to do that nervous system work first. And then we have to, of course, identify our different parts, our protectors, our vulnerable parts, and then what self feels like. The coolest thing is that every single part has their own vagal tone. That means shape of their nervous system. So if when, I was 5 years old, I experienced a trauma, I went into a high state of freeze, shock. Oh my gosh, it was so much. Maybe you experienced some kind of abuse at that age. So that part of me is stuck in that experience, and the shape of their nervous system still exists inside of me. Then maybe, throughout my childhood, I experienced chronic fighting in my home. And so there's a part that's maybe fully developed at, let's say, 12, who goes into panic. Whenever someone raises their voice, I go into panic. So now I have the shape for that 12-year-old is a high, what's called sympathetic state in the nervous system. So high level of that sympathetic state. You get the idea. We have all these different shapes of the nervous system depending on what they experienced. The shape of adult me's nervous system or self is in ventral or regulation. And so when doing parts work, we're actually traveling time. Anytime you are triggered, by the way, you are traveling back to one of those parts of you and you re-experience the same vagal tone or shape of the nervous system that you felt back then, you feel right now. The same exact thing. So for all intents and purposes, you're not in 2015. We're in 2025. Oh my gosh. You're not in 2025. You're in 1985 or whenever it happened. So we're traveling time all the time. As you can see so far, there's a strong correlation between the two modalities. Polyvagal theory, which isn't actually a modality, of course, but polyvagal theory in internal family systems. So every part has a vagal tone. really important to not just cognitively understand the parts, but feel them in your body. What does it feel like when we're here? We also know that our nervous system creates our whole experience. So if the shape of your nervous system of that 12-year-old is a sympathetic, shaping, that means that every other part of their experience is going to match the feelings, the thoughts and sensations, the behaviors, the perception of self, others, and the world around me. So everything they experience then, I experience now when they are activated in my body. The work of parts work is that I can invite in one of those parts from the past to be present in my body while adult me is present. So it's essentially like we have both versions of ourselves, their vagal tone present, the regulated me and the part that experienced whatever they did. And the job is that I call this internal co-regulation. Co-regulation is connecting nervous system to nervous system. You and I are doing that right now. Internal co-regulation is adult me connects to the younger parts, and my job is to help them discharge that experience and come into regulation. This is the reparenting process, and I truly don't know a way that you could possibly do parts work without that if you want it to be really effective. In this way, we imprint a new past experience, a new childhood in our psyche and also in our nervous system. And the result is our baseline for what love is changes, our baseline for experience changes, and it becomes what we've given ourselves. So thank you everybody for being here today. I invite you to think this week, is there a way that I might be able to lean into having a hard conversation? That might just begin with what's actually my truth. In what ways have I been resentful? What's underneath the resentment? What am I actually needing and feeling? And what might make it possible or tolerable to step towards being more seen and more known so I can show, not tell my system that conversations that are hard can be very different now. Enjoying this episode and want to go even deeper into somatic healing? You can join my email community for weekly teachings, tools, and live events. Click the show notes to join.